For this year's writing prompt, you have a couple of options. One option is to write about animals in captivity. And for this prompt, you'll notice that there is a blurb here that talks about some of the circumstances regarding this topic. So basically, there have been a variety of reasons why animals have been kept in captivity, including scientific research and human entertainment. Then you'll notice that it says here that you should preview your print sources and put a star by 2 print sources that you want to use. You can also tie in information from the video that you're going to see that's on your topic. In fact, for this particular topic, the video comes from a documentary called Blackfish, which talks about how the killer whales at SeaWorld have been treated over the past few decades. And then the main prompt focuses around the idea of, is it ethical to keep animals in captivity? Are there situations when it's okay versus when it's not okay? When is it cruel and when is it for a good cause? So if you notice in this packet, this first one, if you preview your sources, first text source that you have to choose from is this one, and it's called Wild Animals, A Life of Captivity and a Future of Zoos. And this comes from the Washington Post from 2012. And so you would read and go through here, and then also you would read the back. My advice to you is, as you read, to use a highlighter to go through and highlight different words or phrases that you think are crucial toward developing your argument. Also, keep in mind, you shouldn't necessarily have your mind made up about your position on the topic before you get started. You want to see what all the sources have to say before you begin. And then, another source option that you have is this one. And basically what this is a big table of statistics. The first page focuses on statistics that relate to endangered species. And you can kind of read through, and there's some animals you might recognize, like, oh wow, there's a grizzly bear. And then on the second page here, you have statistics that are about zoos. So those are things for you also to go through and highlight and consider and ask questions about as you're developing your thinking on this topic. Your third print source is an article called Zoological Parks, and it comes from a periodical that's called Animal Sciences from 2010. And this article does a really nice job of presenting both sides of the issue. So again, you would go through and read, maybe with highlighter in hand. You would mark the lines or the passages that you think are most important toward either side of the argument. And it goes on to the back here as well. What's really nice about this article is if there are certain words that you're not sure about, there are also key terms for you to look at. So that's topic 1 in a nutshell. All right, so now I'm going to talk you through prompt number 2, and prompt 2 is about hunting. So you can see here again, it's set up very similarly to the other prompt. So we have a basic little blurb here about hunting. You need to preview your print sources and put a star by the 2 that you think you're going to choose. And then again, you have a video for this particular topic that you'll watch, and it's called something like Hunting is Conservation. And so you'll get to include that as one of your 3 sources that you use for your writing. Then, you use your sources provided, you choose your 2 print sources plus the video, you pull your evidence from these sources, and you use those in your writing to support your viewpoint. But again, keep in mind that you don't necessarily want to come in already knowing your viewpoint on the particular topic. You want to look and see what the sources tell you first before you make your decision as to which side to write for. The prompt itself is very similar. Is hunting ethical? Are there situations when it is okay versus when it's not okay? When is it hunting and when is it poaching? Down here it talks about taking a clear stance on the issue. Think about which pieces of evidence from each source you can use that led you to your point and what you might write to analyze each piece of evidence. So if you notice, a lot of the language in here, like point, evidence, analyze, those are all words that your language arts teachers have been using a whole lot. But the thing is, those words don't only relate to language arts. They also relate to your other content areas too. Just something to think about. So as we preview our sources in here, first one, you go, ooh, picture. We have this article, and it comes from Billy Joel's website, and he is one of the spokespeople for 96elephants.org. So there's this article for you to read through. And again, you want to do that with highlighter in hand. And so when you come across certain lines that you find compelling or interesting, you go ahead and you highlight those particular lines. And then after you're done reading through the entire article, my recommendation would be to go back to the places that you've highlighted and actually write down questions that you have and things that you're wondering about. And what that'll help you to do is to really think through the various pieces of evidence that are available to you in the source. Your second print source to choose from is called Helicopter Hog Hunting Takes Off to Eliminate a Texas Nuisance. And this is a really funny interview that was conducted on NPR. It's not supposed to be funny, I found it funny. Basically, it's where there's a bunch of guys in Texas who decided to start a business where they take hunters up in helicopters so that they can pick off these huge hogs from the air. So it's kind of interesting. And it's for population control of the hogs. And then there's this. You might have heard a lot this summer about Cecil the lion, who was a lion on a nature preserve in Zimbabwe. And this guy is the one who killed Cecil and took his head home as a trophy. So there's this whole article that talks about when is it hunting, when is it poaching. It presents a little bit for both sides. It has a lot of really good information in here for you again. And some pictures and statistics on the back. So those are your two prompts to choose from. All right, so you probably want to know how this will be scored. And if you look at the rubric up here, basically what we've got is this is basically a 6 traits rubric. The reason why we're going with a 6 traits rubric for this writing prompt and for all the future writing prompts this year is because what 6 traits does is it talks about the good aspects of writing, of any type of writing piece. So ideas and content is a huge part of argumentative writing. So this is something to definitely focus on and take a look at. And basically what this covers is, do you have a main point in your writing that you're focusing on throughout? Are you including supporting evidence and details? And are you analyzing those details and evidence that you're including? Looking down here, is your writing organized? Does it have a structure? Do you have a way to introduce your writing, and do you conclude your writing? Now, for what we're doing, we're really writing an extended P-E-A-E-A-E-A-L type paragraph. So you don't need to have separate paragraphs for this piece of writing, but just keep in mind it is a nice idea to have a sentence to introduce and a sentence to conclude your thoughts. Voice is also something to consider, and that's where you think about, for this particular type of writing, what type of personality should I be showing in my writing, and who exactly am I writing for? Who is my audience? And think about that carefully as you put your writing together. Word choice is also important. You want to make sure to be precise. You want to use words that are effective, that get your point across well. Imagery, if it fits, you can use that. And then also any literary devices, if you find them to be useful for this particular type of piece. If you notice in here though too, sometimes there are content-specific terms that you can use that will really strengthen your writing and make it look like you really know what you're talking about, as long as you use those words correctly. Another thing to consider is sentence fluency. Do your lines flow? Do your thoughts make sense? If you were to read it aloud, would it actually flow in a reasonable way? And then finally, conventions is down here. But this is not one that we want you guys to get stuck on. While spelling and grammar and punctuation can be really important, what we're really more concerned about for these writing prompts is right up here. We are more concerned about your thinking and the fact that you have a point, that you're using evidence, and that you're analyzing that evidence. So don't worry too much if you have some spelling mistakes. It's really not a big deal. Now, I also wanted to show you a couple of student examples. There are a few students who took the prompt early this year. Here's one. This is a student who chose to write to the topic animals in captivity. And so what she's doing here is, first, she is introducing the topic. So she's talking about it generally. Then she's coming down and making a point right around here. And then, if you notice here, this is beautiful. She's saying, in the text, zoological parks, there is a line that says, and then here she is including a direct quote from the text that she felt was relevant toward proving her point, which is back up in here. After that, she is analyzing that piece of evidence. So she's discussing it. She's making sure to say, how does the evidence relate back to the point? So that's just something to keep in mind as you're working through. And you'll notice also, she's pulling from different types of sources. So here's the article on zoological parks, and then down here, she's actually talking about the documentary Blackfish. And again, she has a nice transition where she has, in the movie Blackfish, there is a line that says, and then she puts it in here. Now obviously, for the documentary, you may not get down what they say word for word, and that's okay. That's when you might paraphrase your ideas instead, put it into your own words. So that's just one sample to show you. Now at the end of this whole exercise, you're going to be asked to choose a favorite part of your writing, a favorite piece of evidence, like this student did here, and then also the analysis that goes with it, which she indicated with this pink line here. And then over here, this student is explaining why this is her favorite evidence and analysis pair. But this is something that your teacher will talk to you about before you go today. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Another writing sample that I wanted to show you is this one. Now, this is focusing on hunting. Now, notice that this student could have titled it here if he wanted to, but for this exercise, I guess he chose not to. But keep that in mind, that you can title it according to your point of view. And then here, we know right off the bat that he's talking about hunting. He's opening with a question, and then he's discussing, and then he's getting into his evidence here. So again, he's following that P-E-A, E-A, E-A-L kind of model. And then he's rounding it out with a conclusion down here. So a nice concluding statement can also help with your writing. Kind of keep that in mind. And one more to show you. This student also wrote about hunting versus poaching. And so again, right off the bat, you can see based on her transition, here we go. Here is a piece of text evidence that she's about to include. And she's referring back to the 96 Elephants article, and then she has her piece of evidence, and then she's going to discuss it a little bit. So definitely it's really important to be including evidence and then analyzing your evidence after you include it. Okay, for myself, I actually decided that I should do this prompt as well, because whenever I taught, I tried to make it a practice where I would never give my students something that I wouldn't do myself. And so I wanted to try out this whole process and make sure that it was going to work for you guys. So here's something that I wanted to recommend to you. And I talked to you a little bit before about highlighting and annotating and close reading and that kind of thing. But just to show you what that can look like. So even with the prompt here, you want to take some time to make sure that you understand what the prompt is asking you. So what I did is I went through, and as I was first reading the prompt, I highlighted this whole deal here, because I thought that was important about choosing 2 print sources, because I didn't want to do 3. And then here, you may use the information from the video. So 2 print sources plus the video, good to go. Then over here, I highlighted the word ethical, because that seems to be a key word here. Also, animals in captivity, highlighted that too. Situations when it is okay versus when it is not okay. And then down here I highlighted, take a clear stance on the issue while I was reading through. Now you should know that these questions were not here on the first round. The first round, all I did was I highlighted. The second round, I went back through and I looked at what exactly did I highlight and what am I wondering about it. So for this first part here, I said, do I only have to use 2 sources? What if I want to use just 1 print source? And those are definitely good questions that you can ask your teacher too, by the way. Down here where it says ethical, I said, does this mean moral? Is an ethical thing a good thing? What is the true definition? And so on. Animals in captivity, I started wondering, is this referring to zoos? Are there some cases where it's okay and others not? And then down here where it says take a clear stance. Can my opinion have a qualifier with it, or is it more black or white, yes or no? So basically, by asking questions, you're figuring out your thinking, and oftentimes, if you go beyond the what does this mean kind of question and start really probing into it, you'll actually wind up answering more of your own questions that way. So again, while this looks like a lot right now, I went through and I highlighted first, and then I went back for a second round and looked at what I highlighted and did my thinking on it. So keep in mind that's an option for you as you're going through and you're reading your sources. It can really help you get your thinking straight and figure things out. I also did that for the statistics too. There were a lot of statistics that caught my attention. Like this one, for example, where it said number of animals that are vulnerable. It says 10,002. And I said, does this include the endangered ones too? It was something I was wondering about. And then down in here, I noticed that a lot of these animals here, are any of these that are endangered, are they in zoos now? Because I was trying to make a connection between the two things. So keep in mind that you can do that. Now, another option for you though is if you don't want to do close reading, you can actually write on these organizers instead. And so here what I have to show you are 3-column notes, and you'll have these available to use when you're reading. So over here is where, as you're reading, or maybe after you've read and highlighted, you would go through and you would put evidence that you think is relevant over in here. After you've done that, you think on your piece of evidence. What is the viewpoint for that particular piece of evidence? For this one, it seemed like it was against, and then I explained why. In this column, this is my thinking. So about this piece of evidence, I'm wondering, well, how many trainers total were attacked or killed? Okay, so this is something that you can use. And then after reading or viewing this source, I am thinking. So after reading this whole thing, what do I really think this source is telling me? What's important here that I want to hold on to? You also have options for planning. This is the option that I chose to use. This is option 2. You have another option that I'll show you in just a minute. But basically what you have here is in this box you would put your point that you want to make in your writing. So obviously this is after you've gone through all of your sources, you've done good thinking on them, you've asked questions, and now you're ready to form a viewpoint. So here's my viewpoint. Then I have my evidence in this column over here, and these all come from different sources. This is from Blackfish, this comes from one of the articles, and this comes from the Washington Post article here. And then over here is what I would say about that evidence. So this is kind of thinking through my analysis or how I'm going to support my point. And down here, what will I say to link back to my point? So I put in kind of my final thought down here. So this helps me to plan out my thinking for how I'm going to go about writing my essay. But even before that, something that you can do is on the back of your planning sheet, you're going to have a space to do a free write. And a free write sometimes helps you when you've got the 3 sources, you've finished all of them, and you need to go back through and kind of get your brain straight around what do I really think about this particular issue? What did the sources really present to me? You might go ahead and just take a few minutes just to write it all out. If you notice, I thought that it was kind of gross that they are selling tickets. All right? So, and this was my final product here. Now, as you can tell from my previous samples, my handwriting is atrocious. Keep in mind, you guys are not getting graded on handwriting either. It makes it easier on your teacher if they can read what you write, but I'm sure they're very glad they don't have me as a student. So, a couple of organizers for you to look at. For one, when all of you are viewing your video, it doesn't matter which video you're doing, this is the note catcher that you're going to use. So here you have my before you watch, so this is like your things that you know already about this particular subject. What do you know about killer whales, for example? What do you know about hunting if you were to choose that particular topic? Down here, what do you want to know? What are things that you're wondering about that this documentary or video might present to you? And then you're going to go ahead and watch it without writing down anything. And after you watch it, once the video clip is done, you're going to record your ideas, your questions, and your thinking. What are your first impressions based on what you saw? Then your teacher is going to replay the clip. And as they replay it, you're going to write down what you learned. So this is where you're actually going to write down your evidence from the video. So what are some of the different pieces of information that the video is presenting to you? And after you've done that, you'll go, okay, based on this piece of evidence or this bit of information from the video, what am I now thinking or wondering as a result? So this side leads to this side. And that should help you to get your thinking straight on the video. For reading, you may choose to use this organizer. If you don't want to write directly on the text, if you only want to highlight on the text but you don't want to write down questions on there, that's okay. You can use this instead. And basically what you'll do is you'll write your article title up top, and after you've gone through the first time of reading the article, you're going to pluck out some evidence that you think is significant. You're going to examine what the viewpoint is, just like I showed you on my organizer a few minutes ago. And then what your thinking is based on that evidence. And again, down here, after reading this source, I am thinking what? And this is two-sided, so this is for the other two sources that you're going to choose from the packet. Now, you also saw my planning. So this is option 2 again. So here's the space for your free write. And notice it says side A. So you start with this first, you write down, here's my thinking, here's my thinking. And then after you've done that, you flip it over and you start to really make sense of your ideas before you go and you commit them to paper. But if you would prefer something that is more structured, what you do first again is you still free write to get some ideas down and try to figure out what your point might be. But then you flip over to this side, and basically what this is, if you notice, is an extended Peel paragraph laid out for you, and it tells you what to put into each part of your paragraph. You don't have to write in complete sentences with either option, but the more you plan out your thinking in advance of writing, probably the stronger your piece of writing is going to be. So just something to keep in mind. And then there's this checklist here on the bottom for when you're ready to begin writing. These are just some things to think about, so you can go ahead and read them and then check them off as you finish. Your writing itself is going to go on a sheet that looks like this. Now, another thing to consider is that your teacher is not going to give you all of these papers at once. It's going to be one at a time so that you guys will have time to process and think throughout this whole writing prompt